We said it throughout this whole investigation. This is a Dateline case.
She was in such a state of shock.
Your life flashes before your eyes.
Oh my God, he did do this.
It was a true whodunit.
You look at the closest people first.
He's having an affair with the wife.
Everything was a blur. I dodged a bullet.
She was gone in an instant, like blowing a candle out.
It was the most complex murder case I've ever tried. We did our job and we got him convicted.
Hi.
Guys, that was some trailer. That's an intense trailer for Dateline.
That's pretty intense, huh? Yeah. I'm a little scared now.
It's a little frightening, yeah.
It sells a procedural show very well.
We do a lot of procedure, yes.
Yep.
Okay, so congratulations, 26 years, 26
Can
seasons.
you believe it?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you think when you started doing this that it would be going on for this long? I mean, it's essentially an institution at this point.
No, I did not.
I figured maybe, 6 months. No, yeah. It developed legs, that's for sure. And the thing was that the show always had really good people running it.
Yes.
That's so important.
No, I mean, that's been the great thing about Dateline is that it's always this, like, giant team effort. I mean, the people you see are here, but the people you don't see are phenomenally talented, and they make our jobs so much easier, and that's actually what's been so great to work there. No, I didn't think this was going to last 26 years. I mean, in television, nothing lasts 26 years. Yeah.
That said, though, as you said, it's great people working there. Was there a different feeling as soon as you got on? That you're like, oh, this feels different than what normal things feel like.
Yeah, and that was intentionally inculcated by the our original executive producer, and has been continued on ever since. There is people talk about this in programs, and you never really believe them, but there's a genuine family feel in this program. We all kind of care about each other. I described it one time, though, like when you're doing something in a hurry, and we can crash an hour in a day, right. But it's like being at the controls of, even though you're not really necessarily doing much controlling, of a jet that's got 1 million parts, all of which have to work perfectly for you to fly the damn thing.
That's when we
and
are,
it flies,
When we are pulling together something quickly, when Michael Jackson has died the day before, or there's been a big natural disaster, or there's been some kind of terrorist attack, or something that we had to whip together quickly, that's when you see this place really clicking.
What's it like when you have to whip something together quickly, but you have an episode of something that you had been planning for, months? You've been working on a story for like 2 months about this, a murder case somewhere that, no one's really heard about before, but Michael Jackson dies, and you have to put this family story on the back burner.
Well, that happens sometimes, and you just deal as best you can. Occasionally, they'll ask you to carve 10 minutes out of a
which I would rather not do. I mean, once I've written an hour, like I want it to run as an hour. I'm sure you do too.
Same thing.
What'll happen is usually what we planned will run next week. Right. Or the next time we have a new show, which might be the next day. It might be Sunday.
Might be the next season. You never know.
But usually, I mean, in all the years I've been here, like only a few times has something that I did not run. I mean, eventually they all get on.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process like for you guys in terms of finding stories?
I work really hard to find stories. He doesn't work at all. No, we work with, again, the same thing.
What's the name of the fish that eats what the shark is finished with? Yeah. The stories.
Which one's the shark and which one's the fish?
The stories that he doesn't want are the ones that I take.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how does it work? You have a team of producers who pitch you ideas, or you guys are digging in the dirt as well?
We hear about stuff. We have people who, we read the newspapers all over the country every day. We have people who read there's one guy who just reads the Florida papers, right?
Well, Florida man, of course.
Imagine how much fun that is, right?
I imagine it's a lot of fun if you like weird news.
It's great. It's where all weird things come from.
Sure.
And, then we start making calls on things once we hear about, we read about something, and frequently by the time we make calls, somebody else is making calls too. I mean, it's pretty competitive out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, we sometimes we go and talk to the people, find out what they're like, see what they look like on camera, maybe shoot a little iPhone video of them. You know, you want to try to get everyone. If the defense will talk but the prosecution won't, or the other way around, or the family won't talk, you know, we don't pay anybody. So everybody's doing this because they want to. Sure. And if they don't want to, sometimes there's no story.
And depending on the story, are you in competition with the other networks?
Yeah,
often.
all the time. Yeah.
Often.
I know that you guys have been kicking ABC and 2020's ass for a little while.
Well,
right?
I wasn't going to say that, but yes, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
What is it like being? I mean, obviously none of you guys are paying, but what is it like to be in competition? Do you ever call up a story or call up a subject for a story, and they're like, "Sorry, I've already agreed to do this with."
That happens.
Yes. Sure, with somebody else, and by the way, they're paying me, and then you'd think, well, wait a minute, that network doesn't pay people, so.
Yeah.
But then there's, people are always trying to work that boundary, and one decision we made a long time ago was we're just not going to do that, and people get to know it, and it works out. Because people are telling us their stories because they want to tell our stories, because they think it's important to get them out there.
And because they want to know that their story is being told not just in a minute and 25 seconds on the local news.
Yeah.
That you're going to get some context, and you're going to and that in many cases this might be the only time that your story does get told, and it'll be told over an hour or over 2 hours.
Mm.
When you go out to someone, you're sort of pitching Dateline to present their story. What is generally the pitch? Or is it dependent upon the situation?
Totally dependent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're telling this story, and we can't tell it the right way if you don't help us.
Right.
Have you ever had a situation where someone decides in the midst of you guys are already doing this story and playing it that they don't want to do it anymore?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's reporting that happens.
I mean, sometimes you try to talk them into it and say, look, you know, you agreed to do this.
And sometimes you understand why they don't
Yeah,
want
and
to do it.
sometimes-
And I'm not going to tell somebody to do something that's not in their best interest.
Yeah, right.
or that
I get no
that's gonna
pleasure
hurt
out of
them.
making people do things they don't want to do. So if they don't want to talk, then they don't want to talk. But I say to them frequently at that point, look, we're going to do this story with you or without you in it. I guarantee you will be happier with the final product if you are in it. I'll try and tell your side of the story, but you're going to do a better job than I will.
Does Dateline have
I should have been writing that down.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
or news magazine shows? I mean, I guess specifically Dateline we're talking about. Do you guys have set stories that you know work really well and generally bolster pretty good ratings that you tend to go after a little bit more?
Yeah, you tend to. But then, even after this many years, we're surprised frequently that something does well that you didn't expect it to.
Like what?
Well, it was kind of the end of last season, it was a couple of months ago. I had a story that we'd been working on for a long time, and everybody talked, and it, should have worked out as a good story, good hour. But frankly, it was just boring. It wasn't interesting at all. So I kept saying, no, you can't put this on television. You just write off the money, doesn't matter. They decided to put it on television anyway. It got the biggest audience we'd had all spring. Really? It was crazy, yeah.
That is one of those.
So you just never know, really.
It's one of those weird events where you're too invested in something to really see it from the big picture.
Well, so, we end up, because we see these stories like 4, 5, 6 times before they air. Frequently, we know the details. You have to remind yourself that you know the details so much better than the audience does. Yeah. They're only going to hear it one time. When we are thinking about doing a story, we're doing a murder story, and it's who killed Mary? Could it be her husband John, who had sworn to kill her, was found covered in blood, didn't have an alibi, and she filed an order of protection against him? Well, if it is him, that makes it a difficult story to tell. If it's not him, then you've got a great story to tell.
You've got twists and turns. Right. You've got your first half hour, and then you've got your second half hour, basically. Yeah, it fits to the format, to the structure.
I always make sure. I mean, and I know you do too. We at Dateline we always differentiate between the storytelling and the story. The storytelling is absolutely fun. I mean, you get to sort of lead viewers, around corners, and there are twists and things like that the audience doesn't see coming, that we maybe hold back on. And, you know, sometimes we dress somebody differently so you can't tell that they're in custody or that they've just gotten out of custody, something like that. But the story itself of what happened, that's not funny.
No.
Those are deadly serious, and people never recover from that stuff.
No. So this is part of the very delicate, I'm sorry, part of a very delicate balance, because, you know, those people you care about, and they're giving us their story. And you wind up being attached to them. Yeah. They give us their story for free because they feel it's important to get it out there, and so you have to be very respectful of what they've gone through.
Have you ever found a moment where the story got in the way of the storytelling, or vice versa, because you had a certain attachment to the story, and you're like, look, this would be amazing if we manipulated this, and manipulate is the wrong word, excuse me, but, you know, if we,
if you cross over into manipulation, that's a problem,
Yeah, if we told the story this way, it would be a huge hit, and people would go crazy, but it could hurt those that are involved in the story.
Sure, I mean, look, I don't want to air any story in which the people we talked with think to themselves later, I wish I hadn't done that. I got screwed here. So believe me, we have a whole department at NBC that does nothing except ask that question of us before it airs. Like when Ricky sees this story, what's he going to say? Is he going to say, you captured what I think accurately, or is he going to say,
I got on TV.
How dare you? Right. Yeah,
well, and he may not like the story, but at least you feel that it was done fairly, and that's the important.
I mean, there are some stories that that are almost so difficult to do. I mean, you know, some sex crimes, some crimes against kids. The audience is not going to stick around for that. People will change the channel. Those make it very difficult to tell.
What is the hardest story that, you know, in the years that you've been at Dateline, that you always think back on? It was really one of the hardest stories for you.
You know, oh boy, there's a lot of stories. How many have you done?
Oh, I don't add them up.
I don't either. I mean,
I don't know.
A lot.
Many.
So
hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds. So you know, you don't tend to sort of remember one in particular, but some are harder to get on the air. There was one just less than a year ago involving the murder of prostitutes. These are the most vulnerable people around, and the least respected. And they often come from underprivileged, low-income backgrounds, and they're the flotsam and jetsam of society. And it's hard to get those stories on the air. Who's going to care about this? But there was this particular story, and a particular detective who was determined to solve this crime of these prostitutes being killed, and put her own career on the line. And we figured, well, you know, we want to put our credibility on the line too and see if we can sell it. And eventually we did, and the show made the right decision, and it was a wonderful story to tell.
It's incredibly important to tell stories like that.
It doesn't matter who the victim is. It matters that it's a human being, and what we do to other human beings, somehow we have to figure out why we do these things and how we, you know, what we're capable of.
The detective that Michael Connelly writes about, Harry Bosch, who's a fictional detective for the LAPD, his line is, when he's investigating murders, is, everybody counts or nobody counts.
Right.
And that's how we operate as well. You know, everybody is somebody's kid. Everybody is somebody's brother or son or boyfriend or girlfriend. And, you know, it's funny, you were talking about that story about, you know, prostitutes being killed, and then a lot of people didn't care, and then there was one guy. I did a story with, like, exactly those elements in Albuquerque a few years ago. And it got a huge response, despite the fact that, you know, most of the women were the people that you know, a lot of people just went by on the street and didn't pay any attention to.
And it's important to cover those stories because those who, you know, murder the most vulnerable know that they're not going to get covered that often.
If you have a rage against women and you're homicidal, they'll get in your car. I mean, they'll do the job for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a huge detour here on the conversation that we're talking about and lighten it up just a little bit, because I just remembered that I received an email from your publicist about this, and I really wanted to ask you about it. I keep looking at your shoes.
Yes.
Oh.
You have many, 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 many pairs of Converse. Is that true?
I have no idea.
When did your love of Converse start, and what started it?
I'll tell you the honest story. Why not?
Has everything else been dishonest, Keith?
Wow.
No. No, I used to wear orthotic shoes. I thought I had to. I wore them for years. I'd go out and spend too much money for ridiculous-looking clodhopper-type shoes that had these giant insteps in them. And one day somebody said to me, "You're out of your mind. Just go get a pair of slip-ons." And
They're all slip-on Converse.
so I did. Yeah, the slip-on Converse. And he was absolutely right. I haven't had a problem since.
So it's really just
That's
a
sort of a
practical-
commercial, right?
That was good.
Yeah,
that was,
probably shouldn't have done that.
You should be getting paid for that.
That's right.
So it's a practical thing. It's not necessarily an aesthetic thing.
Well,
even though
it started
does
out
make
as
you
a
look cool.
It started out as a practical thing, and then after a while, if you don't wear Converse, people, what's the matter? Where are your shoes? So I think, what the hell? I just wear them all the time.
Let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question out here? Who's right
Yeah.
here?
I've just always wondered, when you're interviewing someone and you are absolutely sure that they're lying to you, how do you approach the questions and how do you approach them so that they trust you and then you're still able to get somewhat of the truth?
You know, I mean, look, that happens a lot. And it doesn't only happen with the person who's the suspect in the story. I mean, frequently other characters in the story are telling you things that aren't true. You know, frequently people are talking about the victim in some way that turns out not to be true. Or they're talking about someone else involved in the story in some, look, everybody, we try to talk to everybody. And, if someone is lying, then, we challenge all the characters, everybody from the.
He has a pretty good eyebrow for that.
From the prosecutor, right, and then also the way we look at them has something to do with it. But the, I mean, you have to challenge everybody, even the sympathetic characters in the story. And
you challenge it, but you don't. It's rare that you want to beat them up because even if you know they're lying like a sidewalk, you don't want to be mean or unfair. It just doesn't.
Right, and
it
also
doesn't help you.
And if they're lying, it's going to be apparent.
Yeah.
To the audience.
There's also a rule. It sounds like a terrible rule, but there's a kind of a truth to it. Is that everybody lies, kind of all the time, because you're always amending your own personal story to make it a little more acceptable to yourself and to the other people around you.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, sometimes people talk about the victim in a way that sort of sanctifies them. I mean, people don't want to believe that any victim in any story ever did anything that brought themselves into that put themselves in danger. But people do. People make foolish choices. They don't always deserve to die for them. But so there's a lot of sort of getting to the truth no matter who you're talking to. Sure. Sometimes it's the murderer, but not always.
I mentioned the Converse, but you also have a collection of pocket squares. Is
I do,
that
but
true?
they're all white, so
they're all white.
Yeah, no,
We'll just drop that one.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I started wearing these like 35 years ago, something like that.
You're that old?
I was 7, and I was a child, which was weird. And
it is weird.
And
you get beat up a lot when you were a kid.
Yes, and as an adult. And then I kept doing it, and then somehow through social media there started being this huge. There's a Twitter account called Mank Square. I don't even know who that is. And yeah, now I have a lot of them, and I wear them all the time. I didn't know that this was going to be a focal point of today's discussion. I would have worn something a little more brightly colored.
That's kind of boring. I'm
Right?
say,
It is. It's kind of nothing.
Dull,
I know.
yeah.
I know.
Keith, a few years ago, Bill Hader did an impression of you on SNL.
Which was so good.
It was really funny. It was a very funny impression. What did you make of that? And have you talked to him about it since? You're both in the NBC family.
I have something to add to this when he's finished, by the way.
What did I make of what?
Of the impression.
Of the impression? Whose? No, I'm kidding. It's a weird thing when this happens out of the blue and you don't expect it, and it's very strange. But it was extraordinarily funny. And I've never met him, but he's apparently a really nice guy. Apparently. And I'd be happy to meet him someday, but it hasn't happened.
The day after it happened, which was like the Monday or Tuesday after Hader's first impression, I was in the office and he was in the office, and we don't see each other in the office very much because we're usually out covering stories. Yeah. And
thank God.
And he said to me, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "What did you think?" I'm like, "It's very funny." And he said, I wasn't sure what to make of it." He said, but my kids all thought it was hilarious, and they kept playing it again and again and again and falling down laughing.
True.
He said, so I'm like, and I said to him, you, like, this is the greatest thing. We should all hope for this.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
To be on the fly on the wall as your kids were playing it over and over again in front of you and laughing hysterically, and you just sitting there baffled.
Well, one of my kids lived on the East Coast, and I lived on the West Coast, so naturally they saw it before I did.
Right.
And I get this call at whatever 9 o'clock at night or something, and there's somebody incoherently screaming on the telephone. Told me I had to watch the show and how great it was and how wonderful it was. And I was a little terrified, waiting for Saturday Night Live to come on. And then, yeah, it was something.
No, we take time for 2 more questions.
Really talk like that?
So as you've been saying, the show's been on for a long time, and you were talking about some of the toughest stories to cover, but I was wondering what some of your fondest memories were or what some of your favorite stories to cover have been over the years.
In 2005, I did a story that I had wanted to do for a long time about how if you watch television or TV news in the United States, you would believe that all of the people who are missing are white, female, blonde, and attractive, because that's all we were covering for a long time. And we did dozens of stories about Lacey Peterson and the woman in Aruba, Natalie Holloway. And most of the missing people in the United States are men, and a much larger percentage are minority than the population at large. And so I did a story sort of talking about that. And for a little while, I thought sort of the journalistic ship of state kind of changed course a little bit. It actually remains one of my proudest stories.
Yeah. And it's still, there's just nowhere near enough coverage of, it's a trope, if I can use that word, that probably goes back millennia, where it's the hapless young blonde victim who gets all the attention.
Damsel in distress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to struggle against that all the time. And it's because it's a commercial business, it's hard to do that, but we got to keep going at it because it is a serious issue.
It goes back to the storytelling thing that you talk about. It's a struggle against storytelling, which storytelling is in many ways is playing off of the myths and the structures that have come to define how we think of stories. And the damsel in distress is as old as the story itself at this point. So yeah, unfortunately, it's like a knee-jerk reaction for people to sort of immediately get involved in that imagery. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was the things. It's better now than it was then. Things have definitely changed a little bit. Needs to keep going.
Not enough, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Here, you.
Hi.
Ask.
Hi.
Have you ever experienced any legal or law enforcement issues, like while trying to tell a story, or maybe that got in the way of telling the story the way you wanted to tell it?
Yes, a lot. That's kind of a constant. If I've understood your question correctly, is it does law enforcement occasionally try to prevent us from reporting what we'd like to prevent?
You can't tell or expose on your story.
By the time we get on the air, we don't put it on the air if we have to leave something unexposed that needs to be exposed.
We usually wait till the end.
Yeah.
That's because prosecutors and cops. Oops! Look at me.
Sorry. Don't worry about it.
Glad it was you.
That was me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
clumsy.
Prosecutors and cops generally won't talk to you until the story has been, until the case has been fully adjudicated. So that's why we wait until the end. Also, you want to be able to get the court file, which has, the 911 call in which the person sounds right or doesn't sound right, and you want the crime scene photos, many of which we can't use, but some of which we can.
Sure.
So, we usually wait until the end, and that helps a little bit with having to hold back on stuff. I mean,
it's an ongoing negotiation.
It's rare that we know something that we don't report. Usually we tell you everything we know.
But that's it. I want to go back to how you originally answered the question, which was, I think you interpreted it as law enforcement getting in the way of a story.
Well, they occasionally will attempt to, yeah, but and usually it's for good reason, because they feel it's too early and we're going to get in the way of an adequate investigation. Occasionally, it's because maybe they didn't do something right. That happens. Yeah.
And they try to.
And that's brings up another one of the kind of themes that I always find surprising, is that one innocent person, and it doesn't matter who the innocent person is, and even though, again, commercial television would, try to get you to have the young, good-looking, blonde guy, unjustly convicted of something. In fact, lots of people are unjustly convicted of something, and the audience doesn't really care. They hear a story of somebody, doesn't matter who it is, who's in prison, convicted of a serious crime who didn't commit it. There is a powerful, powerful desire to see that person released and to see justice done. And that's another one of those really deeply ingrained things. It's fascinating to watch.
And there's a powerful desire on the part of the majority of, I think, states' DA offices to sort of keep that person in prison and to not have to apologize for the state.
Prosecutors are generally pretty unwilling to admit that their office made a mistake, even when it's a different prosecutor years in the past.
Sure.
Their job is to lock people up and keep them locked up. We find, I have as many problems with defense attorneys as I do with prosecutors, in that, frequently they don't want their client to talk because they've told their client not to talk to police, and they don't want me to ask the same questions in a way that would then be sort of discoverable.
And then they hope that they can make our story not appear on television by not cooperating with us at all. So you have to find a way around that. Yeah.
Right.
After having done this for so many years, what are your feelings about the American justice system? In the last few years, there's lots of writings and lots of conversations about the sort of the failures of the justice system in many departments.
Money spent on competent criminal defense is almost never money wasted. If you have a lot of money, you're going to get a whole different shake from the system than if you're with the public defender. And conversely, if your attorney smells like Axe body spray, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
Everybody hates Axe.
I think that you put it in a nutshell. It's a worry. To me, it's a big worry. It's because, and you talk to anybody who comes out of a trial, at the end of it, somebody's going to be very unhappy and say the justice system doesn't work, it's broken. Right. And maybe it was broken for them, or maybe it wasn't broken. But when you watch hundreds and hundreds of cases go through the system, and you see who winds up in prison and who doesn't, that there's something wrong.
No one that I know has ever come out of a criminal trial as a defendant, as a witness, as a family member, and not said, what that jury heard is not the full story.
Right.
Because of things they wanted to get in that they couldn't get in, or stuff that was inadmissible because it was hearsay, or because it was said by a person who's now dead and can't testify. No one is happy. It doesn't work the way it does on television, and no one's happy with the finished product in a lot of cases.
You understand what the problem is. Hearsay can be a real problem. But on the other hand, the jury just doesn't get to hear the whole story. And I like to hear the whole story before I make up my mind.
That's kind of where you guys get to come in, and try to tell a version of the whole story.
At least
more. Much as you can.
Yeah, at least as much as is possible, yeah.
Well, guys, congratulations on going into your 26th year.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite a long run.
Thank you. Thank
you. Dateline is on Friday nights, right?
Yep. And this season, I should plug this. We've got the 2-hour shows are far and away the most popular ones we do.
And the most fun to do.
They're the most fun to do. And we have mostly 2-hour shows this coming season. It'll be beginning Friday the 29th, I think it is.
Right, I think starting from Friday the 29th, all the rest of this year, I think we're 2 hours.
Congratulations, guys. Josh Mankiewicz, Keith Moore. Give it up.
Thank you. Thank you.